Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to those of you who are logging in. We're just a couple of minutes away from getting started. Let us know where you're from. Please put something on the chat, and we are excited for today's presentation. So we have people from Jacksonville, Florida. Phil Goldfarb, who's our lead moderator of the Jewish Gen discussion group. He's out in Tulsa. Welcome. People from Tampa, Ohio, sunny Southern California. Welcome. There's people in Massachusetts, Tennessee, Florida, Connecticut. More people out in California. It's going by pretty quickly. Somebody from Israel, welcome. And Jerusalem from Louisiana, great to see you. Bonnie Burns from the Jewish Genealogical Society of Long Island, welcome, glad you're with us. So to everyone who's joining us, we're about a minute away from getting started. You could leave a note in the chat where you're from. It's good to see all of you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's Jewish Gen Talk on researching Jewish roots in the Southern United States. My name is Avraham Grohl, and I'm privileged to serve as the Executive Director of JewishGen.org, which is an affiliate and the Jewish genealogy arm of the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust in New York City. We have a wonderful panel discussion today, the first in a series, which will be moderated by Karen Franklin. And a few points before I turn it over to Karen. First, the session is being recorded. So if you miss it, or if you'd like to share it with friends and family after the fact, it will be available on the Jewish Gen YouTube channel. We will post an announcement on the Jewish Gen discussion group when the presentation is live. So if you're not on the discussion group, please visit the Jewish Gen homepage, JewishGen.org, and click on Connect. It is a wonderful opportunity to engage with thousands of researchers from around the world, and I hope that you will all take advantage of the Jewish Gen discussion group. Second, we will try to answer questions at the end. So as we go along, if you would like to ask a question, please leave it in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Third, following the presentation, any materials that the presenters wish to share, along with their contact information, will be emailed out so that you can follow up with them directly and also ask any questions that we might not have been able to get to. And finally, a Jewish Gen request. We are in the middle of our spring appeal, which is a very critical fundraiser for us. We're trying to raise money for our general operating support fund, which helps fuel all that we do, including the hosting of the USA database, which we'll learn about a little bit later. If you are in a position to do so, a contribution of any amount would be greatly appreciated and collectively would make a great difference. So if you're in a position to do so, please visit the Jewish Gen homepage and click on donate. Either way, we're glad you're with us. Everything Jewish Gen offers will always be at no charge. And I thank you in advance if you're in a position to do so for your support of our important work. With that, I welcome you all once again to this week's Jewish Gen Talk, and I now turn it over to our moderator, Karen Franklin. And I don't see Karen Franklin. So until Karen gets back on, it looks like we had some technical difficulties. What we're going to do is we're going to pass things along to each of our presenters. While the presenters are watching, their videos will be turned off so that you're only going to see one person at a time. So you shouldn't get nervous if you don't see all of us at the same time. And so we are going to start with Jeremy Katz from the Bremen Museum in Atlanta, Georgia.
Thank you so much, Avrami, and JewishGen and the Southern Jewish Historical Society for organizing this program. The Bremen Museum is honored to be a part of it. My name is Jeremy Katz, and I am the Senior Director of Archives at the Bremen Museum, formerly the William Bremen Jewish Heritage Museum in Atlanta, Georgia. If you're not familiar with the Bremen Museum, we are Georgia's Jewish museum, and we house the Ida Pearl and Joseph Cuba Archives for Southern Jewish History, which is the largest repository for Jewish history in Georgia and Alabama. It dates back all the way to colonial America, documenting Savannah's rich Jewish history, all the way till the present day, things that we've collected from John Ossoff and during the pandemic. Our holdings consist of over 2,000 manuscript collections spanning millions of documents, tens of thousands of photographs, over 1,000 textiles and artifacts, and over 1,000 oral history interviews. We have all these amazing resources, but how do you access them? Well, I'm really excited to demonstrate that to you all today, especially since our online catalog systems are currently undergoing a 21st century makeover. We took advantage of the pandemic and turned lemons into lemonade, all that time at home, to revamp our collection catalog system to make our collections more accessible than ever before. So how do you access the collections at the Bremen Museum? The easiest way to do that is through our website, thebremen.org. Please note that's BREMAN.org. Go to bremen.org, you hover over research, and you see here Southern Jewish Archives. You can click on that, and this takes you to the landing page for our Ida Pearl and Joseph Cuba Archives for Southern Jewish History. You can learn about who we are, how to access our collections, and also ask the archivist, which takes you to a portal where you can fill out a form that contacts us directly with your inquiries. Let's go back to our main page. So there are 3 main databases that we utilize to describe our collections. There's not one database system that can describe all the contents in our collections. I hope one day there will be, but there's not one that can describe oral histories to the standard we want, to describe manuscript collections to the standard we want, or artifacts and photographs. So we have 3 separate databases. And as I mentioned, we're in the process of migrating to the industry leading catalog systems in the archives field. So let's start with oral histories, for example. So this is our new oral history catalog system. And what's really cool about this system is that it's really revolutionizing the way that oral histories are being made available to the public. So you see here, we have the Esther and Herbert Taylor Oral History Collection, which is a more formal oral history collection, spans over 1,000 interviews. We've cataloged about a quarter of those so far. And our Moments in Time collection, which is a more shorter clips focused on specific topics. So let's search here for a very common Jewish surname, the Katz, Cohen, Levy, whatever you name it, we have all of them. And so here you see all of the mentions of where Cohen is described in the oral history collection. So we could scroll down and see where it's mentioned in the description, the subjects, the index, the transcripts, the annotations. Let me click on an oral history and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So this oral history was shot in 1991 on audio and a cassette tape. And here you see the descriptive information of who the memorist was, the scope of the interview, as well as subject terms. And you have the media here alongside an index that is timestamped. So you can learn about her early life. This is a perfect example, family genealogy. You can also hover over these points below the media and jump right to that.
Both of your parents were born here in Atlanta. Right. Let's go back to the first generation of your family in Atlanta and who they were and how they came here, the information that you know about that, what their names were. Mm-hmm.
I'll stop it there for time's sake. I know I'm getting to the best part, but it's increasing the access whenever they change the subject in the interview. We also have a timestamped transcript. So this makes our oral histories text searchable. Every 30 seconds, there's a timestamp. And we also have annotations as well. So whenever they mention a term like temple, we can add the context to that term, because there's a lot of different congregations that use temple to describe their congregation. So we can add that particular context, whether it's Jewish congregations or holidays or Yiddish terms or Hebrew terms. We can add that additional context to lower the barrier and provide higher access to these collections. And here you see Cohen is mentioned. So you can jump right to that point that I searched and see every time that that surname is mentioned, and jump right to the nearest point, 30-second mark, and hear them talk about it.
Said Jonas, nobody knows who the Lobes are, so you better change your name to Cohen.
So it's a really, really, really powerful system. And actually, we are one of 2 archives in the system that in the country that have integrated our oral history collection catalog system with our manuscript collection catalog system. So if I go back to our main website, let me go back to the Bremen.org. We actually just jumped from the oral history to our finding aids to our manuscript collection with that link. So it's a seamless transition between these 2 catalog systems that we integrated and synced. And so you see here Harriet Greenblatt alongside the other 250 oral histories that we've cataloged in this fashion across both platforms. And also one other really cool thing about our oral history collection is we just added our full index of oral histories, even the ones that aren't cataloged yet in this new system, over 1,000 interviews to JewishGen. So when you go into JewishGen, you can link directly to our oral history catalog, and then you can search the database for terms, and it will show which of those come from our collection. Thank you to JewishGen for making that happen before this program. So now we are over into ArchiSpace, which is our manuscript collection catalog system. And this is a really powerful system too. So let's do it. All right, here, let me show you how many things we have in the system. We have over 427 collections, over 28,000 records, over 1,000 digital objects, 484 subjects, and over 325 agents. So let's do a search for Cohen in our manuscript collection catalog system. Here you see all of these manuscript collections that are identified and inventoried in this system. So let me click on one at random here. And you can see that it gives you all the descriptive information about this collection, as well as an inventory of the collection too. You can view it either along the collection organization, all the boxes and folders and what the information is that are within these folders. And if you have any questions, here's the Ask the Archivist a Question button, which takes you to, again, Ask the Archivist portal. So making it very, very easy to contact us if you have any questions about the materials that you're finding. Lastly, how accessing our collection catalog. Our collection catalog is where we are describing our item level collection. So photographs, artifacts, textiles, and small collections. Let's do a search in here for Cohen. So here you're seeing all of these photographs that have some sort of mention to that surname. And here you see all these subject terms that relate to this particular photograph. So I could talk about this all day. I know my time is very limited. The last point I want to make is that when you search our collections, make sure that you are going to all 3 of these databases to search and find all of this information. I'm going to put a link in the chat to our homepage where you can navigate to those 3 different databases, as well as the Ask the Archivist a Question, and we'll get back to you we try to get back to you within 48 hours. With that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Dale at the College of Charleston.
Thank you, Jeremy. Dale, before you start, I'd just like to make a note. Thank you for everyone who's asking questions. Please try to keep the questions general in nature. We're not going to be able to provide personal research advice or assistance within the context of this program, but we will try to answer questions that are as general as possible that will be useful to as many people on this meeting as possible. So thank you very much. Pass it over to Dale.
So Avrami, I think you have to enable my video. There we go. There we go. Okay. Welcome to everyone. I'm Dale Rosengarten, speaking to you from sunny South Carolina. And I'd like to share my screen and show you a few of our databases. I have to say I'm envious of Jeremy. His are all integrated, and I'll do mine one at a time. So what do you think of when I say Charleston, South Carolina? Hospitality, port city, old world charm, probably not Jewish history. But since 1995 at the College of Charleston, partly to dispel the widely held myth that the South has no Jews, the Jewish Heritage Collection has been assembling a powerful archival collection of Southern Jewish materials. Our mission, it may surprise you to hear that Charleston boasts one of the first 5 congregations in colonial North America. In fact, by 1800, the city had the largest Jewish population in the United States. Our mission is not just to collect, but to broadcast. So let me jump right in with Mapping Jewish Charleston, our most recent production. We chose the handsome maps for this online exhibit to highlight critical moments in Charleston's Jewish history. By the time our 1788 map was made, Jews had already been in Charleston for 100 years. Mapping Jewish Charleston shows you precisely where in the city Jewish people lived and worked and were buried, sites and venues from carefully researched biographies of individuals, augmented by images drawn from our extensive collection. So the 1788 map, which, if those of you who know Charleston, was just a fraction of what is now Peninsula Charleston. If you go to Abraham Alexander, for example, you'll see a biography of the second Chazan of KK Beth Elohim, a biography of him, and then some imagery, which when you can also click on and enlarge, get more information about the picture. Coming back to our main menu, 1833. This is, for those of you who know Charleston's Jewish history, right in the middle of the first reform movement in America, which began in Charleston in 1824, and eventually by 1841 resulted in the first Reform congregation. Judah Benjamin, probably our most famous native son, the Confederacy's most highly placed Jew, and again, some documentation from the archives, which you can access right from this page. The 1910 map brings us into the era of East European immigration to the United States. And those of you who are familiar with this know the southern trickle began a little later than in the north, but by 1907, let's say, we had truly a little Jerusalem. We had Jewish stores lining King Street, very few of which are still functioning, but many of which have some trace on the street itself. Just to show you one that is becoming, will become better known in the next few weeks. The Lincoln Theater. This was a building that was owned by Samuel Banov and renovated as an African-American theater and vaudeville house. It was in existence for many decades, run by an African-American entrepreneur. and closed finally when the building was demolished or almost demolished by Hurricane Hugo. And last but not least, we've jumped into the present. At a very tense moment, I'll say, for Charleston, as the city confronted both the deadly coronavirus pandemic and the ongoing challenges of rising seas and its racist past. This is a contemporary map drawn from Google. It's not as much of a name index as the earlier maps, but it does show basically a walking tour of places that you might visit if you're in Charleston, and quite a bit of information about each site. This is a Bill Aaron photo, fortunately taken 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, when numbers of the Holocaust survivors were still living, and we were able to gather them at the Holocaust Memorial. So moving along to our oral history archives, our database is online. It's a name index. You can scroll or you can jump directly to specific names. I'm going to use Jeremy's trick with the Cohen name. It gives you a description of what's in that particular oral history or panel discussion. And for ones that are already online, you can go to the Low Country Digital Library, which takes you to all of the oral histories that are already online, both as audio and scrolling transcript. So let me give you an example of Abel Banov. You can read the embedded transcript, download it, and follow along the audio if you're interested. These are word searchable, so you'll be able to jump to specific words or search terms that you'd like to find. Similarly, our fieldwork files are searchable. These are organized research materials in ephemera, organized by town and family, searchable by name. Let's put in, for example, Pearlstein. You have to spell it right. And you'll see Pearlstein either shows up in the family or in the subject. And then the materials specifically are in the notes. You can order these from the archives by filling out a request for reproduction form. Mostly they're photocopies, copies of letters, as I say, ephemera, wedding invitations, marriage contracts, clippings, photographs, and they cover the state by town. I'm switching now to our actual library catalog. Taking a bit of time to load up. The most valuable holdings we have are in the manuscript vaults, and they're discoverable by the library's online catalog. There we go. First, you need to click on catalog and then enter a search term such as a family name. I'm putting in a big, important South Carolina family, the Kaiserlings. And it'll bring up all the collections that include that name, family papers, several parts. I'll show you Leon's Kaiserling's family paper. He's probably the best known of Kaiserling's. He was an important New Dealer. And actually, we have several of his books as well as some of his papers, letters, correspondence, writings, etc. If you get to the very bottom, and this is important, you go to View Finding Aid for detailed description and inventory. And then you get, as Jeremy showed you, a folder and box level inventory of what's in the collection. These have not necessarily been digitized, but at least you know what to ask for. Folder 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And you can be very specific when you write and request copies of the materials. I want to go, let's see. Back to here. In the way that the Bremen has a way to talk directly to an archivist, you can click on the Ask Us button and actually ask it's a live chat. You can just put in your question. A librarian will come on and give you some assistance. Finally, a bit of a teaser here. A name index for Jewish Charleston to end all name indexes. This is genealogical gold if your ancestors arrived in the city before 1861. My former colleague, James Hagee, lays out the paper trail for every Jewish individual he could find in the archives from the beginning of the colony through 1861 when the Civil War started, and provides vital statistics for each individual. Also a key to where he found them. You'll note, for example, on this page, Judah Benjamin, who I showed you on the Mapping Jewish Charleston, is found in Elzas's book on South Carolina and Stern's First Families, SFF. He fills in as much of the information as he was able to find, including date of birth, death, first date found in South Carolina, etc. One of the interesting things, if you look through this appendix, are the Sephardic names. If you're looking for Jewish gentry, look no further. This is really the, I would say, one of the centers of elite Jewish life, an extraordinary resource for Jewish genealogy. Now, this has not been digitized yet, and it's awaiting digitization and indexing, which Ellen has suggested that JewishGen may help with. So stay tuned. This resource may become available in the future on the JewishGen website. I'm delighted to answer questions in the Q&A and explore any of these resources with you further. Thanks to all my colleagues on the call, and also to JewishGen and SJHS for hosting this. Turning it back to you, Avrami.
Dale, thank you so much. Karen, our moderator, is now back, so I'm going to pass it over to Karen.
Thank you, Avrami. I actually, if it's okay with you, I'd like to make my remarks at the end. Avrami, can you hear me?
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you want to just pass it along to the next presenter?
Yes, I'll pass it along to the next presenter, whom I believe is Josh Parshall.
Yeah, Avrami, could you put my video back on? Hi, so I'm Dr. Josh Parshall. I'm the Director of History at the Institute of Southern Jewish Life based in Jackson, Mississippi. The ISJL is unique among the organizations here today, in large part because we provide historical resources as part of a holistic approach to our work with communities in 13 states. So we support, connect, and celebrate Jewish life in the South broadly. And part of what that has meant to us in our last 21 years has been historical preservation and telling the stories of Southern Jews as well. So the most sort of prominent thing we do, and perhaps the thing that'll be most useful and immediately accessible to you, is our Encyclopedia of Southern Jewish Communities. Let's see. Can someone confirm that that's showing up for you?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the Encyclopedia of Southern Jewish Communities provides accessible but substantive community-level histories from across our 13-state region. We have 300 entries from Texas and Oklahoma to the Southeast, and that includes Florida. About a dozen of these entries include cemetery censuses. So let me see if I can find one. So if we go to Jackson, Mississippi, where I am, and click on Jewish cemetery list, we get, okay, we've got a full, not that beautifully formatted, but we do have a full cemetery list that was updated within the last, say, 10 years or so. And that's a useful resource, obviously, if you're looking for family that lived in Jackson, Mississippi. What it's also really useful for is getting the context. If you know that you had a Jewish ancestor in one place or another, this is a great first stop to at least find out sort of the Jewish context that person was living in, to find out the names of congregations that they might have been members of, or cemeteries where they might have been buried. Some of the more recently updated entries will also have sources listed, so that if you go and know that your family is from Vicksburg, right, we're going to list the really reliable historical resources to learn more about Jewish life in that place. Let's see. We do get a lot of inquiries from various folks. If you look up Southern Jewish history, or a lot of times people find their way to us. A lot of times we have about the same level of genealogical sort of information as anybody else. Someone will email me and they've already done the same research that I would do, which is using the census or using city directories or something else, from another online database. In some instances, we do have some additional materials. So I'll talk a little bit about our archival holdings. Most of our archival holdings are really just copies from private collections or other repositories. As we were working on this 13-state encyclopedia, we collect a lot of stuff, but we don't, for the most part, hold originals. That said, we do have congregational histories, anniversary books, and sometimes synagogue directories. Now, those are mostly from recent decades. So unless a synagogue happened to, say, reprint the original membership of their synagogue at their 1890 founding, we're not likely to have a complete list of Jews in a given place for a given year. But there's a slight chance, and in some cases we can dig that up. We're the home for the records of Beth Israel congregation here in Jackson. We do hold their archives. As of just recently, we actually share a building with that local congregation. And we have actually institutional records from our own organization, which are really, really interesting, but not necessarily of use to this particular group. Our oral history collection is the other thing I want to highlight. Here is me several years ago now, holding 2 boxes of our oral histories. I think this was sort of as we had finished filling our 20th box. So our oral history collection includes 800 items. Some of those are from as early as the 1980s, which means that really our oral history collection precedes the founding of the Institute of Southern Jewish Life itself. Those oral histories are in a variety of formats. There's audio and video. The majority are not yet digitized. We do, however, if you go to the encyclopedia, there are oral history clips embedded in a number of our encyclopedia entries. So if you go to Brenham, North Carolina, Brenham, Texas, for example, scroll down and read the history, and you'll get sort of short oral history clips. In this case, it's with Leon and Meet Beethoven. He was sort of from a longstanding Jewish family in town. We have transcriptions for some of our earlier interviews. Our most interviews conducted since 2009 don't have a transcript, but do have an indexed interview log. So it's not too difficult to go through there and sort of find what topics are discussed. So that's sort of what the ISJL has. And really sort of as the first thing, I'd really recommend that as you're doing research on your family histories, as you find those Southern spots, using the ISJL Encyclopedia of Southern Jewish Communities is one of your first stops to really sort of get a lay of the land for Jewish life in that place. So thank you. And I believe I am passing the mic to Anna Tucker.
All right, thank you so much, Josh. I'm just going to quickly share my screen here. As Josh said, my name is Anna Tucker. I am curator at the Museum of the Southern Jewish Experience, which is actually opening this Thursday in New Orleans on May 27th. So we will have on-site exhibitions that explore Southern Jewish experiences ranging across 13 states, which I'll put in the chat after this, and across 300 years. And we're drawing on a collection of 4,000 different artifacts and records within our collection. But right now, as we're an opening museum, we don't have those databases online. So instead, what I wanted to do today is spend a little bit of time sharing some quick tips about how to work with institutional collections as you're doing your genealogical research. A very quick disclaimer, we only have a few minutes together, so this is by no means an exhausted list. Instead, this is more meant to get us thinking about how to be most effective when we connect about your family and about your histories. So the first tip that I have is trying to get familiar with the institutions that have collections that are related to your family's history. So as we've already seen from Jeremy and Dale and Josh, there is a wealth of information available to you. In 2014, the Institute of Museums and Library Sciences reported that there's an estimated 35,000 active museums, including historical societies in America alone. To my knowledge, there are no central databases that compile all of these institutions, but I have put on the screen 3 that can get you started to help you start finding institutions within your network, like some of the partners that we're already learning about today. The one that I do want to highlight is the American Association for State and Local History. So they don't have a membership roster online, but they do have a list of STEPS partners, which you can see I've circled in the left side of the screen. And there are some active, some inactive members, but there are over 1,000 historical societies and museums that you can peruse on their website right now. Other resources, which will also be going out to you in an email after this, that you should consider as a starting point to find these relevant collections are CAJM, which is the Council for American Jewish Museums, as well as AAM, which is the American Alliance of Museums. These organizations also have tons of free resources that are available online about a range of historical practices and how to develop this historical narrative. So say you have thousands of these museums. How do you choose which ones that you want to reach out to and contact? One way to consider is to think about your family within a historical context. So choose a particular individual. What era did they live in? What region or regions did they live in? Were there any significant historical events that took place during their lifetime? So say you have a family member and you've been able to trace them back to the colonial era in Virginia or Charleston. This will help start narrowing your search to the institutions that have a scope or collection that could be related to your family. Likewise, if you have a family member who's a member of B'nai B'rith, you can start looking for museums or collections that have B'nai B'rith or a specific chapter within their holdings. The third tip that I wanted to share with you is something that you all are wonderful at already, which is to be specific and to do your homework. Archives and institutions receive dozens or more requests every single day. So doing as much legwork for the archivists and the curators is pretty critical. Before even contacting a museum or archive, become familiar with the scope of that institution and also the specific collections that might have a family connection. So for instance, if an institution like Jeremy's or Dale's or Josh's has an online database or a finding aid, you can list the collection, the folder, and the box number in that email when you reach out to the institution, and you will automatically become one of our favorite patrons. But what if a museum doesn't have a robust database? So say you have Jewish family members in the American South. You look up the Museum of the Southern Jewish Experience, you find my name as curator in the staff directory, but you find we don't have any online finding aids. We can still help, but it will take a little bit more time and a little bit more creativity. So if you were to email me and say, do you have any information about the Seligman family? I might have a little bit of a hard time trying to connect pieces. I probably draw on Josh's database with the ISJL. But if you were to say, do you have any information about the Seligman family from Shaw, Mississippi in the 1920s? I think they owned a store. They're from my family, and I'm trying to do a little bit of genealogical research. Then this gives me so much more information that I can chew on. It has a region, an era, a possible profession, and it's also the goal of your research. So the final quick tip that I have for you today is also to manage expectations. Every single institution has some sort of little difference about them. So some have research fees and others don't. Some have online databases and others definitely do not. Some are able to respond to your inquiry within days, and some might take a little bit longer. So for instance, if you were to reach out to me as we're preparing for the museum opening, it might take a few weeks before I can fulfill your request. But even so, the relationships that you're building with historical institutions are worth that time and worth that effort, not only to further your genealogical and research goals, but also for those of us who work at the institution. So for instance, I'm actually right now looking for more information about the Seligman family of Shaw, Mississippi. So if someone were to email me with that information and start that conversation, it would be a dream come true. So this was an extraordinarily quick overview. I know that we want to get to the Q&A as quickly as possible. But again, the main takeaways are simply to apply the skills that you've honed as researchers, as genealogists, to working with these institutions. So gather your resources, consider the context, be specific, and start the conversation. So I'm looking forward to talking with you soon. So that I believe I'll pass it on to Ellen.
Hi, my name is Ellen Schindelman-Kowitt. I am the director of JewishGen's USA Research Division. I'd like to share some information about what our division is about and introduce you to our brand new website. So we're going to start here with the JewishGen USA database. Our division was only launched this year in 2020. Our goal is to highlight Jewish record collections about Jews throughout America from 1654 through to the present. And there's always been a USA database, but central, and it will continue to be central to our new research division. You may have visited this before on JewishGen. If you haven't, let me share a little bit about it with you. It's searchable material that is created by volunteers, like all of you, potentially. The database currently includes Jewish surname indexes from Colorado, Connecticut, Illinois, Ohio, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and Texas. There are synagogue and rabbinic lists from Illinois and Massachusetts. There are various miscellaneous collections, including tuberculosis patient application records of the Jewish Consumptives Relief Society in Denver. There are bank passage order records from Philadelphia. There are highest Boston arrivals and Feldman Mortuary Record Books. There are other interesting data sets, including detailing Jewish Civil War veterans, the American Jewish Yearbook obituaries. There are Jewish names from the US State Department files and emergency US passport applications. An exciting new addition to the database is the Forward Gallery of Missing Husbands, 1908 through 1914, searchable index. The results include a link to the actual digitized newspaper page housed as an image at the National Library of Israel's Historical Jewish Press collection. The primary objective of the USA Research Division, or what I'm now coining USA-RD, because it's a long mouthful to say over and over. Our objective primarily is to expand this US collection. We encourage Jewish genealogy societies, as well as individuals or other groups of volunteers, to identify new projects, such as the book that Dale mentioned earlier today, and then to manage creating surname indexes to the materials. So what are some of these types of records? We like synagogue or rabbinical collections that document Jewish life cycle events that occurred in the United States. This can include birth, circumcision, ritual naming, bar or bat mitzvah, marriage, divorce, death, and burial. Or we seek materials originating from repositories with a primary Jewish American focus, such as the American Jewish Archives, the New England Jewish History Collaborative, Jewish Historical Societies, Jewish Archives, and elsewhere. Or Jewish newspapers published in the United States in any language. And finally, unique Jewish institutional collections, such as those for hospitals, Jewish hospitals, mortuaries, immigrant banks, orphanages, and other establishments. Please note that Holocaust era materials are typically not sought by the USA Research Division because we have a Holocaust division here at JewishGen. But there are exceptions, such as the oral history collection that Jeremy talked about earlier that we've now added from the Bremen Museum's collection on JewishGen. General civil or public government materials are also not included. Those are more suitably housed on commercial websites. So now I'd like to introduce you to our brand new website. It launched 2 hours ago. You can access it from the JewishGen homepage. I'm going to go up here to the JewishGen homepage. And if you click on the research tab across the top and scroll down to research divisions, you'll see a list of all of the research divisions housed on JewishGen. And if you click on United States, it will bring you directly to our new website. We don't have time to demonstrate the whole site. We encourage you to surf around, but you'll see that there's information under About, Getting Started in Researching Jewish American Records, and then a lot of research and resource links. You can also click on Search the USA database, which will take you directly to the JewishGen collection, where you can place your surnames or the state or the towns that you're researching and search that way. Over here under About, there's an interest form under Volunteer. If you would like to get involved, please complete this form. And there are also a list of potential projects, but you're welcome to suggest others that you're willing to manage. And know that under the research and repositories, either under archives or historical societies or database and lists, there are links to each of the Southern repositories represented on this call today. So with that, I'm going to pass the torch over to Karen Franklin, and then after Karen, we'll open it up for questions. Thank you everyone for being on the call today.
Avrami, can you turn on my video? Oh, thank you. Great. I'd like to apologize for not being available earlier. It was one of those miraculous internet moments, or not, as the case may be. And I would also like to thank all of our panelists who gave extremely interesting and informative presentations. And just to add to it, to acknowledge the co-sponsor of this event, the Southern Jewish Historical Society, one of you wrote asking if there wasn't some sort of all-encompassing organization. And in fact, this is the co-sponsor, the Southern Jewish Historical Society, who, with its own interest in Southern Jewish archives, this will be the topic for the annual conference in person in October this year in Charleston, South Carolina. So you can get more information on that on the site of the organization, which is JewishSouth.org. And also on that site, you will find the journal, the Southern Jewish History, and its past issues, which contain a tremendous amount of information for all of the genealogists here today. I'm going to pass this back now, and also want to suggest that the archives you've heard from today are only a few of the many that exist in the South. We couldn't possibly have highlighted all of them. Others include Beth Ahaba in Richmond, Virginia, the Jewish Museum in Maryland that will be featured in a future upcoming program, the Memphis Jewish Historical Society, and there are collections within universities that also have importance to genealogists. For example, the Schiffman Goldsmith collection at the University of Alabama, the Kaplan collection of early American Judaica at the University of Pennsylvania, and so many more. So I would like to now turn this over back to Avraham Grohl, who will field and answer some of your questions. And thank you.
Thank you, Karen. We had a lot of general questions, which unfortunately we can't, I'm sorry, we had a lot of personal questions for personalized research, which we unfortunately won't be able to answer today. A couple of points. Many of you asked about the links or the URLs to the resources that our panelists have discussed. And we're going to be sending out an email following the program with a link to everything that was mentioned. So you'll have that, and you'll also have the contact information for each of our panelists. A few questions. This is for Josh. People are curious about the sources that were used to create the encyclopedia, and wondering if you could shed some light on that.
Yeah, the encyclopedia, the sources are going to depend a little bit on, they'll vary a little bit state by state and place by place. Because the ISJL works with a lot of partner communities, especially in some of the smaller areas, we did a lot of oral, that's where a lot of our oral histories come from. We, call up a place and say, we're writing this history, who's the right person to talk to? And oftentimes we went around place to place, and so would make copies perhaps of synagogue records that were at the synagogue. And in general, we didn't retain the originals. We haven't mentioned the American Jewish Archives at Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, but essentially Jacob Rader Marcus, who founded the AJA, was pretty interested in Jewish life outside the major metropolitan areas. And a lot of times when student rabbis would travel to the South or to the Midwest or the West, he would instruct them to bring back materials. So that's actually, Cincinnati's a good place to go. So it really depends. But when we were writing Georgia, for example, we went to the Bremen. When we were, writing our South Carolina entries, right? I'm sure that Dale basically handed us the resources we needed, or there was secondary research, right? I recently wrote the Encyclopedia entries for Florida, and there, for South Florida, that's based on secondary research. So the sources really vary, and that ranges from sort of amateurly written, community synagogue histories to oral histories that we did ourselves, to secondary research, especially in the larger cities where that stuff already existed.
Thank you. A question for Anna. Congratulations on the museum opening. Will the exhibitions, or will any of the exhibitions, be viewable online? Something that you mentioned was relevant to some of the research areas that people are focused on, and they're interested to learn more, and if anything will be online.
Great question. That is definitely a goal that we're working towards. So we're having our soft opening on May 27th, which means we open our doors and people can come through. Our grand opening is in early October. And by that time, we hope to have a significant number of our collections, but also digital exhibitions online as well. So you can sign up for our newsletter where we'll continually post about when those online exhibitions are going up. But that is something that we hope, because I mean, really, we worked on this museum and the curation of this museum throughout the pandemic. So we realized the incredible importance of online collections and online databases. So we wanted to start contributing to that as much as possible. It will just be rolled out over the next several weeks and months.
Thank you. A question for Ellen, or two questions. First, are there any databases of Jewish newspapers from the South, and which extract the genealogical information that would be valuable from it, obituaries, etc.? And second, there is a resource on JewishGen called the Yisker Book Collection. And for people in the audience who are not familiar, these Yisker books are memorial books, and they were written by Holocaust survivors after the war to document and memorialize the Jewish way of life, and to preserve the communal memory of how people lived. And wondering if there's anything similar in terms of books. They have oral histories, but has anything been written about Jewish life in various cities in the South?
Okay, so regarding the newspapers, if you check out the new website under resources, there is a section titled Newspapers. And I selectively chose 4 links to websites that are gateways to Jewish newspaper collections, including the Historical Jewish Press that I mentioned the National Library of Israel has. There's over 100 Jewish American newspapers available, digitized, so you can see each page and browse. Most are not in English, but some are, so you could look state by state to see if there's something of interest there. And there's a blog that's called the Ancestor Hunt blog. There's a list of Jewish newspapers that are both free and commercial that are directly linked and organized by state. There are also some links on Google and Wikipedia. So you can get to the Jewish newspapers, and at least some of them are OCR searchable, some of them aren't. You're just gonna have to scroll around and take a look. And then in terms of your second question, Abrami, I don't know that I can answer whether there are Jewish historical books about every city or Jewish community throughout America, but we are building a bibliography list on the website as well. And we've started to add titles there. And certainly we would hope that some of these titles that you're finding on the website would motivate those of you who are inclined and interested in volunteering to start an indexing project, and then those books would be searchable on JewishGen as well.
Thank you. And we have representatives of the IJGS, which I will take a moment to plug. The IJGS is the International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies. You can visit their site at iajgs.org, and they are hosting a virtual Jewish genealogy conference this summer, which will be of interest to all of you. So I encourage you to take a look and to register. They have a wonderful list of books for many Jewish communities that people can look at. And we also have Nolan Altman on this meeting. Nolan is our Director of Special Projects. And among the projects he oversees is Jobar, our burial registry, and the Holocaust database, and our memorial plaques database. And he reminded me that we also have a resource called Kehila Links, which is in essence a virtual memorial book that we ask people and volunteers to create. So if someone would like to say that we would like to create a Kehila Links page for Savannah, Georgia, and to provide and to upload pictures and documentation and what life was like, we have opportunities in JewishGen to do so, and you could find that on our website. For Jeremy, could you remind the audience what regions does the Bremen cover? This seems to go beyond just Georgia.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we started collecting materials in the 1980s as the Jewish Community Archives in the closet of the Jewish Federation of Atlanta, and have since grown into this collecting throughout the entire state. In 2015, we absorbed the Savannah Jewish Archives, which increased our collections by 20%. It was 200 linear feet that documented Jewish life in Savannah, dating back to colonial America. We also have done collecting projects in Alabama as well. I would say the majority of our collections are from Atlanta and from Georgia, but we do have some from Alabama as well. And we do get some from periphery states too, a few from the borders of Georgia, so South Carolina, Southern Tennessee, Northern Florida. So I would say roughly the Southeast, but yeah, mainly Georgia and Alabama are the scope of our collections.
Thank you. I'm going to take this opportunity and to thank all of our panelists and presenters. As a reminder, this session has been recorded and we will make it available on the JewishGen YouTube channel within a couple of days. We will post an announcement on the JewishGen discussion group when it's live. So if you're not on the JewishGen discussion group, which I encourage all of you to participate in because it's a way to engage with thousands of researchers around the world. And there are topics that you can search through all the way back to the late 1990s. You can visit the JewishGen discussion group by visiting the JewishGen homepage and clicking on Connect. We will also be sending out a list of all of the websites that were mentioned today and the contact information for our panelists so you can follow up with them. So thank you again to each of you who participated. Thank you again to our panelists, and wishing you all a wonderful rest of the day.